Generative AI tools are incredible and they're only getting better. With a few clicks, we can create original text, image, video, music. And inside these black boxes, all kinds of alchemical wizardry is taking place. And we don't need to understand how they work, but we do need to bear in mind that the base metals that we put into the system, the prompts themselves, are critical to the output generated. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you 8 simple tips that you can use to level up and become a prompting wizard. The first tip is to use the right model that serves your objectives. So in terms of chatbots, I currently use ChatGPT-4 and I choose to invest in a pro account, which means that I have access to code interpreter, to the plugins, to custom instructions and other features that aren't available in the free account. So for me, this is a worthwhile investment because it is my profession. But if you don't have the money or choose not to make that investment, there are other free models available. And I'm definitely looking into Claude 2, which I've heard some really good things about, and that's currently free. Tip 2 is to apply the Goldilocks Principle when crafting your prompts. Most chatbots have a context window, that is a certain number of characters or words that are available in any given chat, and this includes both the prompt and the output generated. For ChatGPT-4 at the moment, that context window is around about 3,000 words, which is plenty for most of the use cases that I have. If I'm working with something that's longer, I'll go over to Claude 2 because it has a much more generous context window. And this would be a good opportunity to introduce the idea of zero-shot and few-shot prompts. A zero-shot prompt is when we ask our chatbot to generate something, but we don't give it any background information, any context, and we place a lot of faith in the model for achieving the output that we're looking for. So here's an example of a zero-shot prompt I wrote recently. Write a poem about the challenges of being a teacher. Now, on the surface, this seems like a fairly straightforward command, but there's so much information missing here. For a start, I haven't specified the kind of poem I'd like to generate. Should it be a limerick, a villanelle, or a ballad? I haven't identified what I consider the challenges of being a teacher to be. Nor have I asked the chatbot to focus on a particular mood or tone. Do I want this to be a pessimistic rant about the challenges of education? Or do I want this to be a celebratory poem that despite the challenges, I love my job? Nonetheless, despite the fact that I've provided ChatGPT with very little to work with, let's see what it came up with.
The Ballad of a Teacher's Quest. In classrooms filled with eager eyes, a teacher stands no compromise. With chalk in hand and lessons planned, they navigate a shifting land. Oh, the challenges we face in this ever-changing space. Yet, we strive to find a way to make a difference every day. The curriculum's a maze to tread, with standards hanging overhead. And yet, we must find room to breathe for creativity underneath. Oh, the challenges we face in this ever-changing space. Yet we strive to find a way to make a difference every day. We juggle roles from day to day, a guide, a friend, a light, a stay, and though the stress may take its toll, we find our purpose, heart and soul. Inclusion, tech, and distant learning, the wheels of education turning. We adapt, for at the core it's love for learning we implore. Oh, the challenges we face in this ever-changing space, yet we strive to find a way to make a difference every day. So here's to teachers far and wide who take each challenge in their stride. For in each lesson that we share, we shape the future, full of care.
Now, this is a pretty decent effort. I'm not a fan of the repeated refrain, and there are 1 or 2 lines that are quite clunky, but it's a pretty damn good effort, particularly considering it generated this in under 10 seconds. But now let's instead look at a few-shot prompt where I give it a bit more information, a bit more specificity to work with. Here are 2 sonnets written by William Shakespeare. Please read and ingest the material. Then, using them as examples, write a parody sonnet in the same style about the challenges of modern teaching. You could include the pressures of class sizes, excessive workload, poor pupil behaviour, and low pay. End the poem with a twist and emphasise that despite these challenges, it remains a worthwhile and meaningful career. Now, as I've suggested here, I cut and pasted 2 sonnets written by Shakespeare into the context window as part of this prompt. The first one was the classic, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" And the second one was, "My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun." And that was quite an interesting choice because that is a parody poem where Shakespeare is riffing on the idea that his love doesn't meet the conventions of typical beauty, and yet nonetheless he adores her. Or him. It's unclear who Shakespeare was writing that poem for. But you get the idea. I've primed the model by inputting a couple of examples of what I'm looking for. So with this additional information, let's see what ChatGPT came up with this time.
Shall I compare thee to a crowded class, where 30 minds do clamour for my care, deadlines approach, the hours so quickly pass, and yet the marking pile seems unaware. The board's demands do shift like winds of May, and admin tasks do dim my fervour's glow. Yet in this chaos, some do find their way, though oft their progress seems a trudge, not flow. But lo, despite the stress and endless toil, the spark in youthful eyes doth keep me near. No sum of gold could tempt me from this soil, for shaping minds is why I persevere. So long as youth do seek a guiding hand, so long lives this and teaching takes its stand.
Now, to ask a chatbot to mimic the Bard of Avon's a high bar to set. And whether or not you like the poem, I'm quite impressed with it. You get the point. A 0-shot prompt leaves a lot in the hands of the model, whereas a few-shot prompt, giving a little bit of background context and information, means that we can be much more efficient in crafting the outcomes that we're looking for. So this leads me quite neatly to tip 3, which is that we should be using specific rather than ambiguous language whenever possible in our prompting. And to illustrate this idea, I'd like to tell you a little bit about J. Edgar Hoover, the director of the FBI in the 1950s. Now, Hoover was an absolute stickler for paperwork, and he insisted that all of his field agents hand wrote their reports and submitted them on foolscap A4 paper. Hoover's desk was often strewn with confidential paperwork, and with a red pen in hand, he would scrutinise the documents before writing annotations and feedback in the margins, or what our American brethren would call borders, before sending them back or filing them in the appropriate cabinets. The story goes that on one particular occasion, a field agent who was a little bit slapdash in his penmanship submitted a document that had writing from one side to the other of the document, leaving no space in which Hoover could write. Hoover wrote a single phrase at the bottom of that document in bold caps: "Watch the borders." Hoover was not a man whose commands were to be questioned, and this seemingly innocent statement led 150 field agents to dash towards the borders of Mexico and Canada in anticipation of what they assumed was an attempted forced migration. Now, this story is probably apocryphal, but it beautifully illustrates the idea that we need to be really careful about the language we're using when we craft prompts. And as teachers, we know what this is like. How many times have you been in a class where you've made a statement or asked a question that you thought was really clear, and then it's completely misinterpreted by the class? There's a world of difference between delivery and understanding, so we need to be treating ChatGPT as if it's a daydreaming student and try and make sure that it really understands what it is we're asking for. And that's why for tip 4, I'm going to suggest that we operate using a prompt framework, and I'm going to be using the acronym CRAFT in this case. Each of the letters in the acronym stands for an element that we're going to be including in our prompt, and if we cover all 5, we're good to go. The C in CRAFT stands for context, and that's any background information that you think might be pertinent to help the model understand what you're looking for. The R in CRAFT stands for role, and this is when we ask the model to adapt a particular persona that we think might be useful. We can ask it to be a content creator or an expert in child psychology. We might ask it to operate as an experienced classroom assistant or as an expert in email communications. The A stands for audience, and this is a vital part of the prompt framework as teachers, because here's where we tell the chatbot who the materials are going to serve. It's important to specify the age group that we're going to be working with, their ability level, their experience or the skills they already have, and so forth. The F stands for format, and this is what we want the output to look like. Are you asking it to produce a bullet-pointed list, a table, a set of step-by-step instructions, or paragraphs of writing? And finally, we have the task. This is the use case, what we want ChatGPT to do for us. Do you want it to mark an essay or produce a set of reports or create a revision aid? Now, I know what you're thinking. In an ideal world, the acronym should probably be CART-F, because it doesn't make sense to have the format precede the task that we're asking for. But the good news is it doesn't have to be typed into the context window in any specific order. As long as you've covered all 5 of the elements by the end of your prompt, that's fine. So let's look at a real world example. One of the classes that I'll be teaching this year are a group of year 11 pupils who are doing an IGCSE in English literature. So for people who aren't in the UK, that means they're around about 15 years old and they're halfway through their course. Now, my particular class is a support set. That means that they've been identified as pupils who will benefit from additional support in studying the subject. So here's a prompt that I've generated, and as you'll see, each of the elements of craft have been included in the prompt. I'm teaching Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men as part of an IGCSE literature course. We have completed pre-reading exercises and have read Chapter 1 in lessons. Students have been tasked with reading Chapter 2 for homework. I would like to test their understanding of the material. The class are Year 11 students. They are a support set and are halfway through the 2-year IGCSE course. You are a skilled and experienced curriculum planner. Please create a quiz to determine their familiarity with Chapter 2. Include at least 2 questions which require them to show an understanding of the historical context in which the novel is set. I'd like 10 multi-choice questions, followed by 5 short answer questions. So using that prompt, it only took a couple of seconds before ChatGPT produced the following output. And as you can see, it's formatted all of the appropriate multi-choice questions. And then at the end of the prompt, we've got our 5 short answer questions. Now, this quiz is, of course, something I could have produced myself, but this has saved me a lot of time, and I can invest that time now into other aspects of my curriculum planning. Tip 5 is that we should be prepared to fine-tune and iterate from the original output. If we look again at the short answer questions that ChatGPT generated for my Of Mice and Men task, I'm not particularly happy with question number 5. The first 4 questions are fine, but I think the 5th is a little generic, and it's something that I'd like to tackle once we've read a little bit more of the novel. So I've used the follow-up prompt. Can you please replace the question 5 short answer task with a question about the effect of shifting the setting from the Salinas River to the bunkhouse, which is actually something I think is far more important in studying Chapter 2 of the novel. And in response, ChatGPT has generated something that I think is much more fit for purpose. How does the shift in setting from the Salinas River in Chapter 1 to the bunkhouse in Chapter 2 affect the mood and tone of the story? So you can treat your interactions with chatbots in the same way that you would any collaborative process with another colleague. Work together until you end up with something you're both happy with. Tip 6 is to focus upon what you want rather than what you don't want and frame your language accordingly. It might be, for example, that I want to generate a lesson outline on the ways in which women are represented in that novel. So it would be more appropriate for me to use the following phrase in the prompt. The lesson outline should focus only on the representation of Curly's wife in the novel, rather than don't focus on the male characters in this lesson outline. And the reason for this is that these large language models operate using neural networks that are very similar to ours. And if I ask you not to think of a pink elephant... Now, tip 7 is that we should, where possible, use priming. This means feeding examples of the desired output into the large language model. I did this earlier, if you think about it, when I uploaded a couple of examples of Shakespearean sonnets before asking it to generate one of its own. Just as we might prime a pump to draw water from underground, we might want to cut and paste or upload example rubrics or templates to show models of best practice. We could use a phrase as follows. I've attached a document which provides a mark scheme which we will be applying in this use case. After you've read the text, confirm that you've ingested and understood by responding only with read, and we'll continue. And this leads us to the final tip, which is that we can experiment with the idea of chain of thought prompting. This is when we break down complex or multi-step tasks into a series of smaller steps to improve the model's reasoning ability. This can be really useful for things like planning schemes of work. So there you have it, 8 simple ways in which you can improve your prompt crafting. So give them a try, and if you find them useful, I'd love to hear from you in the comments section. If you found any value in this episode, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like and consider subscribing. Until next time.